The day hunting season opened, I was as nervous as Sammy, our house cat. Part of that seemingly endless day was spent getting things ready for the coming night. I cleaned my lantern and filled it full of oil. With hog lard, I greased my boots until they were as soft as a hummingbird's nest. I was grinding my axe when Papa came around. He smiled as he said, "This is a big night, isn't it?" "It sure is, Papa," I said, "and I've waited a long time for it." "Yes, I know," he said. "I've been thinking. There's not much to do around here during the hunting season. I'm pretty sure I can take care of things, so you just go ahead and hunt all you want to." "Thanks, Papa," I said. "I guess I'll be out pretty late at night, and I'll probably have a lot of sleeping to do in the daytime." Papa started frowning. "You know," he said, "your mother doesn't like this hunting of yours very much. She's worried about you being out all by yourself." "I can't see why Mama has to worry," I said. "Haven't I been roaming the woods ever since I was big enough to walk, and I'm almost 14 now?" "I know," said Papa. "It's all right with me, but women are a little different than men. They worry more. Now, just to be on the safe side, I think it would be a good idea for you to tell us where you'll be hunting. Then, if anything happens, we'll know where to look." I told him I would, but I didn't think anything was going to happen. After Papa had left, I started thinking, he doesn't even talk to me like I was a boy anymore. He talks to me like I was a man. These wonderful thoughts made me feel just about as big as our old red mule. I had a good talk with my dogs. "I'd waited almost 3 years for this night," I said, "and it hasn't been easy. I've taught you everything I know, and I want you to do your best." Little Ann acted like she understood. She whined and saved me a wash job on my face. Old Dan may have, but he didn't act like it. He just lay there in the sunshine all stretched out and limber as a rag. During supper, Mama asked me where I was going to hunt. "I'm not going far," I said, just down the river." I could tell Mama was worried, and it didn't make me feel too good. "Billy," she said, "I don't approve of this hunting, but it looks like I can't say no, not after all you've been through getting your dogs and all that training." "Oh, he'll be all right," Papa said. "Besides, he's getting to be a good-sized man now." "Man!" Mama exclaimed. "Why, he's still just a little boy." "You can't keep him a little boy always," Papa said. "He's got to grow up some day." "I know," Mama said, "but I don't like it, not at all, and I can't help worrying." "Mama, please don't worry about me," I said. "I'll be all right. Why, I've been all over these hills. You know that." "I know," she said, "but that was in the daytime. I never worried too much when it was daylight, but at night that's different. It'll be dark and anything could happen." "There won't be anything happen," I said. "I promise I'll be careful." Mama got up from the table saying, "Well, it's like I said, I can't say no and I can't help worrying. I'll pray every night you're out." The way Mama had me feeling, I didn't know whether to go hunting or not. Papa must have sensed how I felt. "It's dark now," he said, "and I understand those coons start stirring pretty early. You'd better get going, hadn't you?" While Mama was bundling me up, Papa lit my lantern. He handed it to me, saying, "I'd like to see a big coonskin on the smokehouse wall in the morning." The whole family followed me out on the porch. There we all got a surprise. My dogs were sitting on the steps waiting for me. I heard Papa laugh. "Why, they know you're going hunting," he said. "Know it as well as anything." "Well, I never," said Mama. "Do you really think they do?" "It does look like they do. Why, just look at 'em." Little Ann started wiggling and twisting. Old Dan trotted out to the gate, stopped, turned around, and looked at me. "Well, sure they know Billy's hunting," piped up the little one, "and I know why." "How do you know so much, silly?" asked the oldest one. "Because I told little Ann, and that's why," she said. "And she told old Dan that's how they know." We all had to laugh at her. The last thing I heard as I left the house was the voice of my mother. "Be careful, Billy," she said, "and don't stay out late." It was a beautiful night, still and frosty. A big grinning Ozark moon had the countryside bathed in a soft yellow glow. The starlight heaven reminded me of a large blue umbrella outspread and with the handle broken off. Just before I reached the timber, I called my dogs to me. "Now the trail will be a little different tonight," I whispered. "It won't be a hide dragged on the ground. It'll be the real thing. So remember everything I taught you, and I'm depending on you. Just put up one Put one up a tree and I'll do the rest." I turned them loose, saying, "Go get 'em." They streaked for the timber. By the time I had reached the river, every nerve in my body was drawn up as tight as a fiddle string. Big-eyed and with ears open, I walked on, stopping now and then to listen. The way I was slipping along, anyone would have thought that I was trying to slip up a coon myself. I had never seen a night so peaceful and still. All around me, tall sycamores gleamed like white streamers in the moonlight. A prowling skunk came wobbling up the riverbank. He stopped when he saw me. I smiled at the foxfire glow of his small, beady red eyes. He turned and disappeared in the underbrush. I heard a sharp snap and a feathery rustle in some brush close by. A small rodent started squealing in agony. A nighthawk had found his supper. Across the river and from far back in the rugged mountains, I heard the baying of a hound. I wondered if it was the same one I had heard from my window on those nights so long ago. Although my eyes were seeing the wonders of the night, my ears were ever alert, listening to the sounds of my hounds telling me that they had found a trail. I was expecting one of them to bawl, but when it came, it startled me. The deep tones of old Dan's voice jarred the silence around me. I dropped my axe and almost dropped my lantern. A strange feeling came over me. I took a deep breath and threw back my head to give the call of the hunter, but something went wrong. My throat felt like it had been tied in a knot. I swallowed a couple of times and the knot disappeared. As loud as I could, I whooped, "Woo-wee! Get him, Dan, get him!" The little Ann came in. The bell tones of her voice made shivers run up and down my spine. I whooped to her, "Woo-wee! Tell it to him, little girl, tell it to him." This was what I had prayed for, worked and sweated for, my own little hounds bawling on the trail of a river coon. I don't know why I cried, but I did. While the tears rolled, I whooped again and again. They straightened the trail out and headed downriver. I took off after them as fast as I could run. A mile downstream, the coons pulled his trick. I could tell by my dogs' voices that they had lost the trail. When I came to them, they were out of an old drift, sniffling around. The coon had pulled out a simple trick. He had run out on the drift, leaped into the water, and crossed the river. To an experienced coonhound, the crude trick would have been nothing at all, but my dogs were just big, awkward pups, trailing their first live coon. I stood and watched, wondering if they would remember the training I had given them. Now and then I would whoop, urging them on. Old Dan was having a fit. He whined and bawled. He whimpered and cried. He came to me and reared up, begging for help. "I'm not going to help you," I scolded, "and you're not going to find him out on that drift. If you would remember some of the training I gave you, you could find the trail. Now go find that coon." He ran back out on the drift and started searching. Little Ann came to me. I could see the pleading in her warm gray eyes. "I'm ashamed of you, little girl," I said. "I thought you had more sense than this. If you let him fool you this easily, you'll never be a coon dog." She whined, turned, and trotted downstream to search again for the lost trail. I couldn't understand. Had all the training I had given them been useless? I knew if I waded the river, they would follow me. Once on the other side, it would be easy for them to find the trail. I didn't want it that way. I wanted them to figure it out by themselves. The more I thought about it, the more disgusted I became. I sat down and buried my face in my arms. Out on the drift, old Dan started whining. It made me angry, and I got up to scold him again. I couldn't understand his actions. He was running along the edge of the drift, whimpering and staring downriver. I looked that way. I could see something swimming for the opposite shore. At first I thought it was a muskrat, in the middle of the stream where the moonlight was the brightest, and I got a good look. It was little Ann. With a loud whoop, I told her how proud I was. My little girl had remembered her training. She came out on the gravel bar, shook the water from her body, and disappeared in the thick timber. Minutes later, she let me know that she had found the trail. Before the tones of her voice had died away, old Dan plowed into the water. He was so eager to join her, I could hear him whining as he swam. As soon as his feet touched the bottom of the shallows, he started bawling and lunging. White sheets of water, knocked high in the moonlight by his churning feet, gleamed like the thousands of tiny white stars. He came out of the river onto a sandbar. In his eagerness, his feet slipped in the loose sand, and down he went. He came out of his roll, running and bawling. Ahead of him was a log jam. He sailed over it and disappeared down the riverbank. Seconds later, I heard his deep voice blend with the sharp cries of little Ann. At that moment, no boy in the world could have been more proud of his dogs than I was. Never again would I doubt them. I was hurrying along looking for a shallow rifle so I could wade across when the voices of my dogs stopped. I waited and listened. They opened again on my side of the stream. The coon had crossed back over. I couldn't help smiling. I knew that never again would a ringtail fool them by swimming in the river. The next trick the old fellow pulled was dandy. He climbed a large water oak standing about 10 feet from the river and simply disappeared. I got there in time to see my dogs swimming for the opposite shore. For half an hour they worked that bank. Not finding the trail, they swam back. I stood and watched them. They practically tore the riverbank to pieces looking for the trail. Old Dan knew that the coon had climbed up the water oak. He went back, reared up on it, and bawled a few times. "There's no use in doing that, boy," I said. "I know he climbed it, but he's not there now. Maybe it's like Grandpa said. He just climbed right out on up through the top and disappeared in the stars." My dogs didn't know it, but I was pretty well convinced that that was what the coon had done. They wouldn't give up. Once again, they crossed over to the other shore. It was no use. The coon hadn't touched that bank. They came back. Old Dan went up the river and little Ann worked downstream. An hour and a half later, they gave up and came to me begging for help. I knelt down between their wet bodies. While I scratched and petted them, I let them know that I still loved them. "I'm not mad," I said. "I know you did your best. If that coon can fool both of us, then we're just beat. We'll go someplace else to hunt. He's not the only coon in these bottoms." Just as I picked up my axe and lantern, little Ann let out a bawl and tore down the riverbank. Old Dan, with a bewildered look on his face, stood for a moment looking after her. Then, raising his head high in the chair, he made my eardrums ring with his deep voice. I could hear the underbrush popping as he ran to join her. I couldn't figure out what had taken place. Surely little Ann had seen or heard something. I could tell by their voices that whatever it was they were after, they were probably close enough to see it and were probably running by sight. The animal left the bottoms and headed for the mountains. Whatever it was, it must have realized my dogs were crowding too closely. At the edge of the foothills, it turned and came back toward the river. I was still trying to figure out what was going on when I realized that on striking the river, the animal had again turned and was coming straight toward me. I set my lantern down and tightened my grip on the axe. I was standing my ground quite well when the visions of bears, lions, and all kinds of other animals started flashing across my mind. I jumped behind a big sycamore and was trying hard to press my body into the tree when the big coon came tearing by. 25 yards behind him came my dogs, running side by side. I saw them clearly when they passed me, bawling every time their feet touched the ground. After seeing that there was nothing to be scared of, once again I was a fearless hunter, screaming and yelling as loud as I could. "Get him, boy, get him!" I tore out after them. The trails I knew so well were forgotten. I took off straight through the bush. I was tearing my way through some elders when the voices of my dogs stopped. Holding my breath, I stood still and waited. Then it came, the long, drawn-out bawl of the tree bark. My little hounds had done it. They had treed their first coon.